Hi, my name is John Rathbun. I'm the Clear Creek Watershed Project Coordinator. I work for the Clear Creek Watershed Coalition, which is a WMA located in Iowa County and Johnson County, Iowa. The watershed starts above Williamsburg, which most people know because of the outlet mall, but actually starts in a town called Conroy, which is north of Williamsburg. And it runs from Iowa County down through Oxford, Iowa, through Tiffin, Iowa, and empties into the Iowa River at Coralville. The governmental parts of the organization are, starting from the upper end, would be Iowa County, the Iowa County Soil and Water Conservation District, Johnson County, the Johnson County Soil and Water Conservation District, the cities of Oxford, Tiffin, North Liberty, Coralville, and Iowa City. The goals of the project are a couple, one of which is to increase awareness about the watershed in general, also improve the watershed. We're also currently looking at reducing flood impacts downstream and water quality as well. We're currently a part of the Iowa Watershed Approach. That's the funding that came through to Iowa back in 2016, I believe, and we were selected as one of the participating watersheds. Our watershed is about 66,000 acres. Like I said before, runs from Iowa County into Johnson County to Coralville. So we're at the Roseanne Sippy property, which is north of Oxford, and I was asked how these sites were selected. Major factor in the Iowa Watershed Approach project is that everything is voluntary, so participation is voluntary and projects or practices are voluntary as well. We met with the Sippys back at nearly the beginning, actually at the beginning of the project. I think Pat and David and Byrne were one of my first visits, and we selected, they showed me 4 different sites that they wanted to do work on, and all 4 of them were ponds. The sites we went through evaluation, and they're all feasible for ponds, and so that went to the design process. When we were meeting out here with the engineer and the Sippys, we looked at the site where we're going to have the fringe wetland, and as we were talking through what could go on at that site, we talked about a pond being first and foremost as a priority. And then we also talked about possibly doing a wetland in the upper reaches of that pond. In the course of wetland investigations, we discovered that there were some wetlands that would be impacted by the pond project, and the engineer, remembering that the Sippys had mentioned an interest in wetlands, they decided to do the mitigation as a fringe wetland around the outside of the pond, in actually probably 90% of the pond's perimeter is going to have a fringe wetland. And you might be asking what a fringe wetland is. The easiest way to say that is it would be along the fringe of a pond, but this one is a shelf varying from probably 6 feet to 10 or 12, maybe 18 feet in some portions. And that's going to be situated so that that shelf is just above the normal pool of the pond. So the soil in that shelf will be saturated most of the time and will be inundated during rain events. So it'll rise up and submerge the plants that are in that fringe wetland, and then drop down over the course of the next few days as the level drains down. There is a water quality benefit of the pond and the wetland too. The water, as it comes into the pond from the upper reaches, which isn't that far away, there's actually a spring there that Pat might talk about. The spring was used for a wagon stop at one point in time back in the 1800s. That's our main source of water, but as the water comes down into the pond from the sides, it'll go through that wetland and be filtered as well. Plus there's added benefit of some, I think, nitrate removal from the wetland as the water drains down, and when the plants are uptaking nitrogen through the dry periods as well. So I mentioned before that the Sippys have four projects that or four practices that we're going to be installing. We have two that are already installed east of here a little bit, and then this one, and then the one with the fringe wetland. The fringe wetland is the pond with the largest area, surface area, and one of the main goal of the Iowa watershed approach is to help reduce flooding, and we do that between the normal pool level and the difference between that and the spillway level, and that's measured in acre feet. The best way I've come to try and figure out what an acre foot looks like is if you go down to the local high school football field and you put a foot of water on it, and that practice on the other side of the road, that the one with the fringe wetland, is going to hold about 8¼ acre feet after each rainstorm, if there's enough rain to fill that much. And all totaled, the Sippys, just by themselves in their little part of the world here, over any rain event, will be holding 14.2 acre feet. So that's 14 football fields an acre or a foot deep in water. They'll be holding up in the watershed and allowing that to come out slowly over the course of the next few days. In total, we're going to be installing 70 different practices throughout the watershed, and I estimate that it's going to be roughly 65 acre feet that'll be held back up in the watershed after any rain event of significance.
Hi, I'm Pat Sippy. This is my brother.
Burn Sippy.
We originally heard about this, the Clear Creek Watershed project through the NRCS, and had a chance to meet John, the coordinator. We went to a series of meetings about the effects of flooding, which were quite interesting and gave us lots to think about, and aspects of flooding that we hadn't considered before. This pond in particular was an existing pond. It was built in the late or early 50s by my dad and uncle. It had outlived its useful life. It was quite silted in. Obviously farming practices have changed in 70 years. And we had talked about, what we were going to do with this pond, and the watershed project came up, and so we were happy to get involved. It gave us a way to deal with the erosion that was happening here from the old spillway. It's given us a way to move forward with this and hold back water, considerably more water than it had been before. So we're thrilled to be able to participate.
Yes, we have been interested in conservation practices, especially our parents, my father, Francis, our father, Francis, and Roseanne, his wife, and we had started a forest on the other side of our farm, and he had started a prairie, and that was years ago in the 1990s, and those are doing quite well. And then we had slowly added more prairie to the farm as we lessened our cattle herd, and we finally got out of the cattle herd, and we are have a lot of prairie practices. And so this is kind of involved with the Conservation Reserve Program, in that it gives us the high quality water that will flow into this this pond and help with flood control.
Flood control is, I think, an added benefit for us, one we hadn't certainly given much thought to previously, how it affects, we're on some of the highest ground in Johnson County here, and really don't think about what flooding does to Coralville and Iowa City. you know, our folks, my mom is 91, she's still here at the farm, and they've always been interested in good conservation practices and have passed that on to us. It's the erosion control is probably what came to our mind first rather than flood control, but after these series of meetings, I can see how they both mesh together. It's a win-win.
The prairie practices are here have increased the wildlife a lot on our farm. We see deer and wild turkey and you know, hawks and owls and obviously rodents of all kinds and pheasants, and so that having access to water will help even more with the animals that are, you know, it helps nature, it helps us have a good practice here.
The majority of the farm is now in CRP. We at this point do not have any row crops. We are still making hay. You know, what happens with the CRP program will determine where we go in the future. This ground is eligible for CRP because it was cropland. You know, we have put in the tree practice. We have put in some pollinator. We've put in some of the mixed short and tall grass prairies for the safe acres, gaining ground for wildlife. We've kind of looked at the programs as they have become available, and you know, wetlands is kind of a hot topic lately. So having this fringe wetland at the pond over to the west is going to be an experience for us. I mean, we're looking forward to that. There aren't a lot of wetlands left in Iowa, and over there it's kind of a unique situation, I think, with there is a spring that comes down from our neighbors that water pretty much flows through. That's not big, but water flows through there year round. Maybe not quite so much now because it's so dry, but it'll just be an enhancement over there, and something we weren't originally expecting because we didn't think there was wetland over there. So that was kind of a surprise, but in the end, it'll be a good surprise.
Oh, we do have some neighbors and friends that will hunt, obviously hunting for deer, and we have pheasant hunters and some turkey hunters, and so you know, during the times when that's available, yeah, they will ask and do some hunting out on the various lands. We get people to stop by and always want to. They see that big pollinator in the background or that short grass prairie behind us, and they're interested. So there is definitely lots of wildlife, and they're interested in hunting.
You know, when we had a cow-calf herd, you know, and did that for many years, so the row crops was always sort of a rotation of, you know, hay, pasture, row crop. As we, you know, our goals, you know, rather changed, and the herd was reduced. Now we did have some tenants in here cropping ground. You know, we certainly looked at the CRP programs as they became available, not probably as financially advantageous to be in CRP, but for us, I think we were happier putting it in the natives and doing the tree planting on what is some very hilly ground. And I think that we're going to leave this farm better. What happens in the future will depend on what happens with CRP. But yeah, we would like to keep it in grasses and forbs if we are able.
Pat mentioned that, you know, this is hilly ground, and we did have row crops here, though. That field behind us, the pollinator, is actually a very good field. It has a good CSR rating, and it for years was going into corn, soybeans, and then into alfalfa. We would rotate around that. But some of these other fields are a little more hilly, and they're mostly for cow pasture, but farmers do put those into corn or beans when they need to, or at least the tops of those. And so getting away from that practice, that creates a lot of erosion when you're going into fields that are a little too hilly. And that's the thing we like to see other farmers take out when they get a chance, take out something and use it for conservation. And some of our neighbors have done that, and that's really nice to see. There are fields that are better suited for corn and row crops, and then fields that aren't, that could do better with a conservation practice or some other practice. So it's nice to see. We felt it was important to move towards conservation, and yeah, like Pat said, it's not always as financially advantageous, but it's something our parents really thought was important, and we do too.